Well, here we are, another Escaping Your Comfort Zone Storytelling Hour. Tonight, I would just want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land that we meet on online today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. So welcome to everyone who's joined us for our next Storytelling Hour. Tonight, I want to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Deanne. Now, Dee and I met many years ago. I've lost count now, when we used to work together, but we were also in the same triathlon team together. That was many years ago, and it was in Melbourne. But Dee is now based up in the ACT, and she's one of our leaders in Canberra. So I'm not going to take any more of your time. I'm going to pass you over to Dee. Over to you.
Thanks, Rochelle. Hi, everyone, whoever might be here. Yes, Rochelle and I have known each other a long time. But basically, she's invited me to have a talk to you about a medical condition and living with a medical condition. So I guess the first thing is that it's not a it's a chronic issue, but it's not life-threatening. So I just want to make that pretty clear from the outset. But first, I want you to imagine you're sitting at home alone in the middle of the day. You're watching a movie and you got to go to the loo. So you go to get up, but for some reason your legs won't work. And you're sitting there and you're going, weird. So I sat there for a little bit longer. I was in denial, basically. I decided that I was making it up. So I tried again about 20 minutes later, and I got up and I was able to walk. And it was a bit shaky and weak, but I was able to walk. So I got on with life. Decided it was just weird. About a month later, it happened again. And my partner was home at the time, and he went and he saw me struggling, and he's like, "Oh, what's going on?" I said, "Well, my legs won't work." Naturally, he was like, "What?" I said, "Oh, my legs won't work." I said, "It happened a little while ago. It'll be fine." And he was obviously going, "Maybe we need to go to the hospital or something." I'm like, no, nurses don't go to hospitals, no. Anyway, it did go away again, and I got on with life, but I did tell him that I would go and see a doctor. So I did go and see a doctor after we got back from a holiday, and they sent me to a neurologist, did all these blood tests, did all the scans, did all the everything, and they found nothing. There was nothing wrong with me. And I said, but I'm not making this up. Like, I have all these, and I'd kind of put together that there was all these other random weird things when I was talking to the doctor when they were asking me all the questions. You know, do you have these symptoms? Do you have those symptoms? Yes, I get tingling in my face and my hands, and yes, I've had weakness. I noticed that there was weakness when I was walking up and down stairs. Sometimes my legs felt like they were going to come out from under me. Yes, I was getting pain, different things like that. And I said, these are not made up in my head. And I was getting really fatigued as well. And the neurologist, I was one of the lucky ones. I got a very good neurologist who straight away said, if it's not any of these other things, it is functional neurological disorder. So this is a condition that not many people seem to know about. It has a lot of stigma in the medical industry, much like some of the other invisible illnesses that you hear about, fibromyalgia and things. People go, it's made up, it's in your head, it's this, it's that. But it's a very real disorder, and it manifests much like multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease in a lot of people, and there's all sorts of different things that will happen. For me, I realised that I've been going to the gym, I've been doing weights. Some days I could lift 50 kilos on the squats. Some days I couldn't even do a bodyweight squat because I felt like my legs were going to go from under me. I thought this was normal. As I said, I was walking up and down stairs for work. You would think it would get easier with time, but it didn't. And some days it was really hard and I honestly couldn't do it. And I just thought, oh, well, it's just stress. I'm just tired. I'm just this, I'm just that. By the time I got diagnosed, though, I kind of looked back at some of the symptoms that had been happening for a good 5 years or so and realised that this was all build up to this condition. So the biggest thing I think was that there's no information, there's no medication, there's no treatment, there's no nothing. So the neurologist said, here's a website, go and have a look at this information. So off I went and had a look at this website. He said, I want you to go and see this psychologist. I'm like, why am I going to see a psychologist? He said, well, you've got a history of anxiety and depression, and sometimes these sorts of things can contribute to this neurological disorder. I said, okay then. I thought I'd dealt with all my psychological issues many years ago in Melbourne when I was living there, and I was like, okay, well, I'll give anything a go at the moment. I feel like rubbish, and I'm scared. I was scared. So the website basically gave a whole range of the different symptoms that could be expected. Some of the various treatments, which basically included a lot of management. It's not treatment, it's management, it's strategies, it's things like that. So I looked up all this stuff, and there was a Facebook group, and I jumped on this Facebook group, and I found that there were people on there with this disorder, and they were completely paralyzed, unable to walk, unable to do anything. Some of them were having seizures multiple times a day. Some of them were non-verbal. They couldn't talk anymore. They'd forgotten how to talk. Some of them couldn't eat. They had trouble swallowing. Some of them had food intolerances, and they would feel sick after eating and things like that. So they had to have nasogastric tubes, and they had to have different things like that. So it scared me a little bit more, thinking that maybe that could happen, because I was working with students. I was visiting student nurses in a hospital. Before that, I'd been working in a ward doing 12-hour shifts. I have aspirations. I was in the middle of studying a master's degree while I was working full time. And it was really stressful to think that maybe all of this would be ripped away from me and that I might not have a future. And it got me really down. So I agreed to go and see this psychologist, and it turned out that I actually had a lot of unresolved issues, and she diagnosed me with complex PTSD, which along with and she said that basically the fact that I had been on the go, under stress, constantly trying to be an overachiever, a pass isn't good enough. I've got to get distinctions. You've got to be up in the morning to go and do whatever it is. And if you're sitting down, then you're lazy. This was the mentality that I had been raised with. And she said, your body's way too stressed out. And this was what was causing all of these problems. Basically, my system had decided that was enough. So how they explain it for the most part, so the most similar disorder that they call it, that they compare it to, is multiple sclerosis. So it's very similar to that. except multiple sclerosis is a hardware problem. So they use a computer analogy. So the sheaths around the nerves are being damaged and obviously then causing short circuits and things. For people with functional neurological disorder, or FND, it's a software problem. So the running joke now is I'm like an old laptop. You can only charge it so much and it doesn't last long. You can charge it for hours and hours and hours. It doesn't last long. So that's the fatigue. I can sleep for 8 hours a night, but I still don't get as much as I used to out of my body. And if you try and open too many tabs, it'll crash. It doesn't support certain software. You think about any old laptop that we've had compared to a new one, and it just doesn't work as well. So that's kind of how I explain it to people. With that, the symptoms vary between people with FND. So for me, I do forget words when I get really tired. So I forget how to speak sometimes properly. The main thing is the weakness, the fatigue, tingles in my face, like little pins and needles and things in my face and my hands. Sometimes my hands won't work properly. At the height of it, I could barely pick things up because I'd just dropped them. So it was really interesting to then turn around and go, well, there's no medication, there's no treatment, there's nothing we can do about this condition. So I took it upon myself, being a nurse, to try and understand what was going on with my system. So the first thing was I quit work. I was very lucky because I've got an extremely supportive partner and we don't have any debt or children. So I was able to stop working and I concentrated on my studies, but I spent a good 2 or 3 weeks on the couch, feeling sorry for myself, feeling like my life was worth nothing. And gradually I came out of that and I started doing 10 minutes of yoga, getting outside. I started doing meditating. Now, meditating for an anxious brain or anybody that understands what it's like to be constantly on the go is really, really hard. And I thought I failed at it when I'd ever tried it before, and it turns out I hadn't failed at it. You just got to keep going. It's called practice. So now I downloaded the Insight Timer app, which was really handy for it because there's a lot of different things on there. Highly recommend. And so meditating meant that I was calming my body and my nervous system down at least once a day for a period of time, purposefully, which really helped. Yoga to help with my strength, to help with my balance, to help with my coordination. And again, it's moving meditation, really. So you're breathing and moving, and that's all you're doing. Nutrition was a big thing. So I looked up a lot of stuff, and the amount of fake food in the world at the moment that we, convenience foods and things that have chemicals and things like that in it. Now, obviously it's got its place, but for me, having all of these things in my system doesn't cope very well. So I'm really trying to minimize the amount of sugar, the amount of preservatives and things like that. So I eat a lot of whole food, basically, just normal basic food. It's no special diet. Alcohol was a big thing. I still drink, but having too much alcohol obviously puts a lot of stress on the system. So there was a particular night not long after I got diagnosed, we decided to go out, and that didn't end well at all. That was probably my lowest moment. So it was basic, and I felt bad because I couldn't go out walking. I wanted to start leading these groups with this amazing organization that had been created for people, but I couldn't trust myself to walk very far. But I started walking. I just started walking locally around the river. And I think that the biggest thing that's come out of it is that as as women, and I mean anybody, but especially as women, we're expecting so much of ourselves these days that we push and push and push and push and push and try and get every second, be doing something every second of every day. Otherwise, you're not being productive and you're not useful. And that's just not true. And for somebody like myself, where resting was deemed for the weak and, you know, you sleep when you're dead, and I'd been doing shift work, and I mean, I could do 3 12-hour shifts in a row, then go out for dinner and drinks and get home at midnight and get up again and go for a breakfast date and do all these things. And people add kids and all sorts of things into that, and it's just too much for a lot of people. And we compare ourselves to each other, and everybody's different. And I think that that was the key that I had learned, that I didn't have to be like everyone else to be successful, that I'm still a very productive, valuable, and I've got a lot to offer, even though I'm able to function now at about 80% of what I used to, which is a lot less really for me. But I now don't feel like sitting on the couch and watching a movie is a waste of time. And I used to think that that was, you know, you don't have time for that. So I think I learned balance, and self-care is a priority. It's not a luxury. It's a priority. So having an Epsom salts bath with essential oils to help support my system, that's essential, but it's essential for everybody, I think, to do things like that and care for yourself, because otherwise we end up just too wired and too overwrought. And this is, I guess, where we're at in society, in the world. And when you think about some of the things that have happened recently, that we are forced to have downtime, and a lot of people have really enjoyed it, and I think we're all going to find a lot more balance. But for me, with this condition, it came earlier, and it's really, really hard to try and live with these sorts of conditions. But if you put some faith in yourself and accept it rather than try and fight it, there's different ways to do things. And I think we can all learn something from that. There's heaps more about this condition and my situation, but I didn't want to go on rambling forever. So if anybody wants to know more, bring the questions.
Woohoo! Well done, Dee. Thanks heaps for sharing that. That story, as I said to you, you told me about that when we were camping in southern New South Wales, and we were in a shed and it was pouring rain outside. I just couldn't believe that. Obviously, I knew you when you were go, 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 and a lot have changed, obviously, in those intervening years. Let me see whether I can put both of us up on the screen. That's a bit better. So I've got a couple of questions for you, first of all. So you talk about it being a, what did you call it? An invisible condition.
Yep.
So how do you find people's reactions to the fact that you might turn things down, or your inability to do things? Do you find that people will think that you're making it up, or like, what have you found in terms of people's reactions?
That's actually a really, really good question. And absolutely, it's hard because especially with something like this that not many people know about. I mean, people know what Parkinson's or MS or things like that are. To say, oh, I've got this neurological condition, and they're like, oh, what's that? Yeah, I feel like people think I'm making it up. I have lost friends because of this condition, because I haven't been making the first move to reach out to people sometimes, and the friendships just fall apart. Or I say no to things, and then people just stop contacting me and asking me. And that's hard. It's really hard. But I think along with everything else that I've learned, that's not me, that's them. And I know I know what I'm dealing with, and I have to, instead of trying to please them, I have to look after myself. And I've made new friends as well. And I've got a lot of friends that have been really understanding and beautiful about it as well. So it's a balancing act. And I guess it's like anything in life, things come and go, and things happen to change what happens in your life. And it was definitely hard to start with, for sure, to change my mentality around that. I mean, I say, it's not them, it's not me, it's them. But to start with, it was really hard. I was like, why don't they like me?
It would feel like a rejection, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. You just feel like, you're like, why can't I do this? This is, like, people aren't going to like me anymore if I can't do anything. But, it's taken, I was diagnosed in November 2018, and I'm still working on a lot of areas. So, yeah, taken a while.
I guess it would have a lot to do with identity too, because you know yourself, and you've known yourself for all your life as being this go person, and that's your values, and that's who you are, and that's your identity. And I have no doubt that you've probably seen people with conditions in the past, and maybe not even identified with them because it's so different to your own identity, and then flipping it over, and it's a different world for you now, and your identity changes, and that just changes everything in your brain.
Oh, for sure. Like when I first started nursing, I would see people with these conditions, and you'd be like, oh wow, that's got to be really hard. But I had no idea how hard. And I now kind of understand what it's like when, some of those people would get all this unsolicited advice, and, have you tried this, and have you tried that, and have you tried the other? And fair enough to be offering that advice for some people because maybe they haven't tried it, but it's the way it happens. And I think, I've definitely got a new appreciation for people that, live with some of these things, and you go, wow, like, it's not that easy, and it feels like you're being patronized every time somebody asks you something about that. And definitely the change of identity, like, to be, working, when I was working with you, it was, working the 40-hour week plus doing triathlon training plus socializing on the weekends plus, and the social life I had in Melbourne was insane. Like, you'd be out Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday sessions, like, all the food, all the drink, all the dancing, all the everything. And I cannot do that now. So yeah, it's definitely a change in identity, but that was one of the biggest things that the psychologist was for, was doing therapy around changing my mindset, to be not expecting that of myself, because although it's become normal in society now, it's not what has to be done in order to be a contributing member of society.
100%, 100%. Life doesn't have to be, you're preaching to the converted here, but life doesn't have to be a grind of 9 to 5, 5 days a week, Sunday night, dreading work, and basically just all work without the balance. There's got to be some give, and there's got to be, and particularly I know a lot of the people in the group are parents as well.
Yeah.
And that then adds an extra layer of like this expectation of busy is good. Busy is what so many people are trying to achieve. But what if we just didn't? Oh, but I have to do. I remember years ago there was a hike at Nuji, and somebody said to me, "Oh, but if I go to Nuji, that'll be an all-day trip for me on a Sunday." I said, "Well, what else are you going to be doing?" "Well, I probably should do some of the housework." And this was a single person. And I'm like, "But what if you didn't?" And she's like, I suppose. And she came. And it's just, we're so conditioned that we should and we must.
I I've had people actually in the past, I remember having conversations with people and I'm like, oh, they're like, oh, what are you doing on Saturday? And I'm like, oh, well, I've got this from this to this and then this and this and this. And they're like, oh, would you be able to, you know, help me with this or do this? And I'm like, oh, I probably don't have time. And they're like, well, between 1 and 2, you didn't say you're doing anything. It's like, why do we have to fill in every hour of every day with something? Why can't that just be reading a book or sitting in the sun, or why can't it be? Like, it should be.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree. And I'm hoping with this COVID stuff, I've seen it in myself, like I said to you before we were having this chat, is that I've actually really appreciated being home. I like adventuring and I like home, but God, being home's so nice and it's so relaxed. And I think going forward, I'm going to be spending more time at home because it's just grounding and it makes me happy.
Just winding things back.
Yeah.
Back to basics is what I said when this all started. I'm like, we're all back. Everybody's going back to basics. Like, they're just doing like on the weekend. They're not doing sports. They're not running around socializing. You're just at home with your family, hanging out. Like,
exactly. And now I just want to bring you back to what you were saying before about people offering you, oh, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried that? And that's a really, really good point I think for all of us to acknowledge is you and I might be having a conversation here and I might think to myself, I want to help this person. Oh, and I'd heard about that. Have you tried that? But I'm actually not thinking about the fact that every person you meet has probably got a suggestion for you.
Yeah.
So, and regardless of the fact that they're coming from the right place, like that can get, I'm assuming, could get really tiring and would feel a little bit condescending because you kind of like, I'm a clever person. I've researched this stuff. I've heard of that stuff.
I think it depends on who it comes from and how it comes. So I've spoken to like just random people, like when you first mention it and they're like, have you tried this and have you tried that? And I'm like, we've just met and we've just started talking about this. Like, I have a plethora of things I have tried and that I do. Like, I have stuff that I do every single day and every single week, and I haven't even started to tell you about that.
Yeah.
So I think it's the way it happens. And a lot of the time, they are coming from the right place, but then sometimes they're also coming from a place of trying to be, I guess, superior almost. But having said that, I think it's definitely interesting. And I think with something like this, where there isn't a lot of tried and true methods of managing or treating it, you do have to get outside the box. And I think some people think of me as a nurse and therefore science. And there's a lot of alternative and holistic things that I've tried and that have worked. Whether that's a psychological thing or not, who knows? But a lot of the things I have also researched science stuff about it, and there's good evidence to show that it actually should and could work. There's just not the ability to do enough research on some of them because of ethics and lack of funding about things and various things. But yeah, it's been very interesting.
I like that term, interesting. Right, so let's go to some comments. So Tracy W says, thanks Dee for sharing. I think the world events have made people slow down a lot and take more time for self and family, and many are better for it. Ali said, thank you so much for sharing. So did Justine. Tracy McCallum is from
Hi Tracy.
Thanks for sharing, Dee. That was really interesting. I might have missed this if you hadn't mentioned it. Is this a lifelong condition, or is there ever a chance that it will ever go away?
So for most people, it doesn't go away. You can go into a remission of sorts. But for most people, if they don't, even if you go into a remission, if you don't manage your lifestyle well, then it will come back. So it's kind of there to stay. I've found that by managing my condition for the most part, as long as I'm not trying to do too much, I can operate fairly normally and I get pretty much no symptoms. I get a few tingles in my face most days and a few tremors or shakes or something here and there, but mostly I can manage. If I try and do too much, though, I start getting tired, and Terry looks at me and goes, so I think you need to not do this. So I'm like,
I want to.
yeah, no, he brings me back down to earth really well. I'm really lucky with him. But yeah, it's pretty much lifelong.
Yeah. Okay. Now back to Tracy W. So people often label and choose to identify people as chronically unwell or disabled. But her suggestion is instead of you are you with some occasional limitations.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And I don't refer to myself as disabled because I'm not. Like, there are times when I might have limited ability. But yeah, I'm just a little bit different.
Yeah. And for anyone who listened to Loie the other night, different's good. Weird's amazing. And we're all us. We're all individuals.
Totally.
Jess Carpenter said, I think since lockdown, people have realised how Jess originally said, being busy has become a badge of honour. Very much so for so many of us.
Totally. That is so true. It's like the busier you are, that it's like, oh, I'm so busy. No, I'm so busy. Like, it's a competition.
Yeah.
Stop it.
There was a really interesting challenge that was going around a couple of years ago that I set myself for, and it lasted a few months. But you don't realise how often your response to something is I'm busy. So a good friend might say, oh, we haven't caught up in ages, let's catch up. Oh, well, I'm pretty busy. I'm so busy at the moment. Or how are you? Oh, I'm busy.
Yeah.
So like Jess said, it's a badge of honor, but it's also really dismissive to the person. Like, it's like, I'm too busy for you. Like, and so the challenge was to try and go a week without saying the word busy. And it was really hard.
It totally is. I find I've actually changed my language as well. Like, people ask and I'll be like, oh, I've got a few things on, let me have a look. Or, you know, like, oh, it is pretty hectic this week. But yeah, trying to step away from that busy because of the connotations it has now. Totally.
Yeah. Okay. Tracy W says, I need a badge for taking time out for self-care. Yes.
We all need badges for that. Everybody should be awarded for that these days.
Gail says, thank you, Dee. I think that the expectation of women these days is to be the super working woman, the super student, and the super mum. For me, interestingly, as a fellow nurse, any self-care was never on the agenda. 7 months pregnant and did not get to the loo once in a frantic Christmas Eve night shift. She said, you're right. Busy is perceived as the good, and I still cannot sit during the day and watch a movie and read a book.
You know what? I crochet. So when all this first started, I took on crocheting with a passion. So much so that I started a page so that I could try and sell these things so that I could get money, so that I could buy more yarn, so that I could crochet some more. Okay, so I would sit and watch a movie because I was forced to, because my legs wouldn't work properly, but I would be crocheting the whole time. There was a day that Terry came home from work and I said, you know what? I sat and watched a movie without doing anything. I watched the movie and paid attention to the movie. And he's like, excuse me? You did what? So, you know, it took a long time. Totally get where that's coming from, though.
It is a struggle. I saw a meme recently that said something about how many series do you watch and scroll through your phone at the same time? Like, has anyone got a series that they need to just watch? I used to do it back when I worked in corporate. I used to it was generally once a month. I'd take a day off. It was generally a Friday, I wouldn't get out of my pajamas all day, and I'd go from the bed to the couch to the bed, and I would read a book in a day. So I'd save it up. Like I love, there's certain authors that I love, but
Yeah.
I'd save up the ones that I was really looking forward to for that one day. And I wouldn't actually, and I made sure it was a Friday so that if it did go late, didn't have to get up early the next morning. But I shut everything off. I didn't have to do any washing. I got takeout food. There was no expectation to do anything other than read that book. But that was so hard to do the first few times.
Yeah.
Oh, no, while I'm home, I should do that. While I'm home, I should do that. It's like, no, stop. We don't do that enough.
Go and put a load of washing on, or yeah.
Yeah. And
I actually started reading more again. Like I used to love reading all the time. I'd be reading, and it just fell by the wayside. And so, yeah, a couple of times a week now, at least once a week, I try and go to bed at least an hour earlier and just lay there and read my book.
I need to get back to that. I need to.
Things.
Right, let's see. Justine said, regarding unsolicited advice, like as if they know what you're going through instead of listening and hearing. They're talking.
You know what? That's so true. And I hear a lot from, again, on these pages where there's a lot of people that are in much more challenging situations than I am with this. And they're constantly getting frustrated because they're like, you've got no idea. Like even doctors and nurses are telling them, oh, you're just making this up, or, oh, you know, you need to do this and you need to do that. And they're like, you've got no idea. So again, it's all about delivery, I guess, and listening to understand rather than listening to respond, I think, is the big thing.
As I sit here listening to respond because I will need to ask another question. No, not really. But it's so true. Like, and I catch myself doing it as well. Now that I've been aware of it over the last few years, like, yeah, it's very easy to listen to respond. Not so easy to listen to hear.
Yeah.
Reggie said, thank you. Shona said, thank you. Kathy Sprayer said, I had to stop saying that I'm tired instead of busy. That's another thing. How are you? I'm tired.
Yeah.
And you've got some fellow crocheters here, Jess Carpenter. Now, I was talking to Jess about possibly running a how to start crocheting Zoom for this group if people are interested. So I might put a call out to see if people are interested. And Susan has also said crochet.
Honestly, it's been my therapy in a lot of ways.
We should just have a crochet group so everyone gets on Zoom with their crocheting, and that's second, and then we just talk rubbish about whatever else.
Yeah, totally. And you know what? It's really like the basic stuff is not that hard. And I don't do a lot of fancy stuff at all. And you get creative though with the colors and the textures and stuff, and it's amazing.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. What have you made?
Oh my goodness! Have you not seen my page, Rochelle?
No, you're gonna need to share it on this live after we finish.
I will. I'll share this page. So I do. I started off when I first started crocheting many years ago, and I started just doing the granny squares and making them into blankets. And then I learned a couple of other kind of patterns and stuff. So the chevron design blankets, but you're doing them different rows of different colors and stuff. Then I decided I was going to make cowls. So it's like a scarf, but it's a round thing instead of having loose ends.
I thought you said you were making cows, like moo.
I knew you would. Of course you would.
I'm like, oh, you're making cows. That's so cute.
Yeah, it would be cute. I probably could. I don't know how yet. I'll look it up, okay, and I'll make you one.
Excellent. No, please make me a cowl because I've only got one and I love it, but I'm so bored of it.
Oh, I've got tons of them.
Or check out your website.
I'll give you mates rates. Washcloths became a big thing. Cotton washcloths.
Okay.
Became really popular for a bit there. And they're so easy to make. And then I started making beanies and a couple of other things. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Nice.
Thank you.
I have another question. You mentioned an app called the Insight Timer app. What is
Yes.
it and how does it work? What do you use it for?
Okay, it's a meditation app.
Okay.
So it has got, so you just download it like anything else, just look it up on your, whatever the app store thing is. And it basically has a massive library of guided meditations. So where somebody's actually talking you through what to do. And it can be anything from basic relaxation, you know, focus on this bit, focus on that bit, to taking you on a journey through a forest or something like that. They've got a range of music that you can just listen to the music while you're meditating. They've got some talks. I think they even run some like little mini courses and stuff on there over a period of days or weeks. I've never done any of those. But it's everything from like a minute to like a couple of hours worth on each thing. It's massive. So I started with like, you know, 5 or 10 minute guided things. And over the last couple of years, I've developed like some of my favorites. You can favorite things and you can favorite, they call them teachers. So the people that produce them all, and you just click on it and you pick what you want to do and you put your headphones in and off you go.
Cool. And do you pay for it?
No, it's free.
Really? There you go.
Yeah, you can pay for premium things and stuff. I don't.
Cool.
But yeah, it's been a godsend, and I think the main part of it though is there's actually just a timer on it. Mm-hmm. So you can just put a timer on and it'll just ding a bell when it's finished or whatever. Okay. So that you know you've meditated for so long. So yeah.
I really like the idea of different lengths, because whenever anyone says meditation, I go, oh, how boring. I can't sit there and do nothing for that amount of time. But if it was like 3 minutes, I'm like, okay, I could start with that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I did it. I can't remember who recommended it to me. But she said the same thing. It was like, I think it was Regan. And she said the same thing. She's like, just start with 2 minutes of something where they're, you know, telling you to breathe in and out or whatever it is. Yeah. And there's so many different like people. So there's sometimes I'll try a new one and I'll click on it and start playing it. I'm like, nope, their voice is annoying. Turn it off. And everybody gets their favorites, right? So yeah, it takes a little bit to kind of build a bit of a library for yourself, I guess. But you know,
excellent.
Highly recommend.
We'll share that in this chat as well. Right, more comments. Kathann said, yes, please, I'd love to learn to crochet. There you go, Jess. We might be running that. Justine said, I love that. Listen to understand and not to respond. One of the things I loved about my sister chats when venting about mum stuff is that she would just let me get it off my chest, not try to fix it, because she knew that the listening helps way more than advice.
Totally. Validating what you're saying is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Susan said, let's have a craft a Zoom. And Justine said, can you link the app in the comments? Sounds good. Yes, we can. We will do that shortly. Excellent. So I just have one last question because I wrote it down. I might as well ask it of you.
Go for it.
So just in terms of your condition and I guess the different identity and the way it plays out and changed your life compared to what it was, how do you find looking at other people's Facebooks and Instagram and comparisons? So you might see people out doing these multi-day hikes, or you might see people doing all this stuff that you're like, oh, that's what I used to do. Are you able to look at it? How can you look at that now? Do you look at it and still compare yourself, or you're past that and you've got more peace with that now?
Look, I think it's you come up with the best questions. It's true though, because you like, I was looking at stuff for a while early on and I was like, oh, I wish I was there. Oh, I wish I could do that. And then sometimes I'd try and do it and end up laying on the couch for a week. But now it's more, it's a goal. It's something to aim for, and it's going to take me longer than I thought it would to do some of these things. Like I've always wanted to do Kokoda. So I want to do Kokoda. And, you know, the fact that I built up from walking the 2K circuit around the river and it'd take me 45 minutes to now I can run hikes going around for 2 hours. I'm like, well, you know, it's possible. And, you know, I think it's really taught me to not compare myself or my life with anybody else, because we're all doing the best we can with what we've got.
Mm-hmm.
And if some of these things don't happen and I can't do them, then there's other things that I can do and that I do have that other people don't. And so it's not really, we've got to stop comparing and just start realizing that whatever it is that we are or we have is special and unique to us. And that's enough.
Yeah, 100% agree. And the thing that we need to remember when it comes to comparing, it's so easy to compare ourselves on Instagram and Facebook to others, but also to our past selves as well, when the stupid Facebook memories come up. But we need to remember that that's the highlights reel. People don't put the stuff up where they're not having the best time. I post all about my bike rides and beautiful sunrises or whatever. The last 3 days I've spent moping around the house moaning. I'm not going to share that rubbish. Like, I might share that I'm not well, but I'm not going to, like, there's no detail there. I'm like, no one wants to hear that. But we've got to remember that we're comparing to the best part of everyone's lives without remembering that that's all that is.
Well, I think that that's really interesting point too, because I did start, and I haven't done it for a while, but I did start sharing the miserable stuff. Because I'm like, okay, well, if we're living our lives on social media now, I'm not going to let people just see all the good stuff, because when they see me in real life, they're going to go, oh, but, you know, your life's so amazing. Like, I've seen all this good stuff. You've been doing all this exciting stuff. And I'm like, yeah, and in between that, I'm dying from pain and fatigue, and you don't see any of that. So I think that we need to start sharing that stuff, because that's the reality of life. And if we're judging people by all our social media, then it's going to make things really, really hard. And, you know, comparing to each other. I mean, it still comes up. Like, don't get me wrong. I still have days that I look at stuff and I'm like, I just wish I could be doing that, you know. And yeah, Facebook memories come up, and I've seen all these things. Like I said, you know, oh, I've just worked 3 full 12-hour shifts and I feel great, and I'm going to go and do this, I'm going to go do that, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, what on earth was I doing? You know, and I mean, then you've got the ex-boyfriends and, you know, you're like, oh, well. But,
the boyfriends, the different body shapes, the different abilities, the
adventures, and you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
Some of it's good, some of it's not. Guess what? That's life.
Yeah. I actually I do spend a lot of my life on social media, and I've had it in my head that I want to share some more real stuff, particularly with Instagram stories and stuff. It makes it much easier. But I know in the past where I've hesitated or whatever, but when I have done it, and there's been a couple of times where I've been bike touring and all's not rainbows and unicorns, and I share ugly crying on social. And they're the ones that I love looking at myself, because it's those ugly crying days that were actually a real journey day. And they're the ones I appreciate looking back at and going, okay, that was real, that was raw. And I think that's a lot of people appreciate that vulnerability and going, oh, finally, it's not all just these beautiful mountains and la da 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 da. It's like, finally, there's some real stuff. Okay, cool. But the one thing that I get scared of is I don't want people's sympathy, basically. So if I post something about not such a great day or whatever, I don't want people going, oh no, you'll be all right. I can't cope with that. I know I'll be fine. Like,
Yeah.
but it's hard when people they're trying their best to offer you what they have. But I'm like, no, that's sympathy. I don't need that.
It's really interesting you say that, because I'm the same. I'm like, I don't want people to feel sorry for me for having developed this condition, and and what I've found though, in all the reading and the learning that I've done in the last couple of years, people are offering those things and because they're uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable with seeing people hurt, upset, angry, negative, what they perceive as negative things. And it's because they want to make themselves feel better that they have done something to try and fix it. And in reality, you have to be allowed to just sit with that. Yeah, you're miserable, and that's okay, because it will pass. Everything passes. And to be allowed to just go, oh, wow, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Is a huge thing, rather than going, oh, you're going to be okay. Yeah, I know. I've done this 600 times. I know I'm going to be okay. Like every time I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
But it's true. Like what you're saying there, like sitting with that discomfort, because why do we always feel like from so many areas we're told to be positive?
Yep.
I say this when I run a body positive hiking organization, whatever. But we're told to be positive, chin up, da da da.
Yeah.
If I want to wallow in my emotions for now, like that's okay. Like to get comfortable within your own vulnerability and your own emotions, and to sit. I feel like the longer you can sit with an uncomfortable emotion, the more comfortable it can become and
it's
easier
normal
to deal with in the future.
Yeah, it's normal.
Yeah.
And I actually mentioned that there was somebody that had posted on one of the FND groups that they were having a particularly difficult day, and their sister was on the phone speaking to them about, how they've got to be positive, and positivity will help get you through this, and all these sorts of things. And she was like, look, I really can't talk about this. I'm in so much pain, and this, that, and the other. And her sister was like, see, that's what I'm talking about. It's like, you know what? That's called That's called toxic positivity.
Yeah.
And there is so much. There's such a thing as too much positivity.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to have balance, and there's yin and there's yang, and you've got to have positives and negatives together. Otherwise, you're never going to appreciate it.
That's right. Oh my goodness, we could seriously talk all night. And let me just read some comments for you. Tracy W said, that's so true. Do it in your own time, your way, it's all possible. Tracy McCallum said, so true, comparing is our worst enemy. Justine said, thanks so much. I love your outlook and the work you've done to make peace with yourself and everything that's happened. Can't have been an easy journey, and I think we can all take a page from that book. I think we all can. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to get Dee here, but Dee put her hand up to do that, because telling her story is like, as I've said to a lot of people who talk on this, is you don't know who's listening, and you don't know who's going to take on one tiny snippet of your story and it might give them some hope, or give them some direction, or give them, oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, that's one of the big positives I think that's come out of this, is that I've made this journey. And I think I saw a quote, it was actually today, I think I've seen it a few times, and it's basically, one day everything that you've been through will become somebody else's survival guide.
Yes, 100%.
If me going through this the way I have helps other people, my work here is done. Like,
exactly.
it's worth it. All I've ever wanted to do was help people. I mean, that's why I became a nurse. So
yeah. And you got your support through the Facebook group.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've offered people support through the Facebook group.
Sure.
as your journey has progressed and people have been diagnosed like you, and they're suddenly at the start of theirs, and you're there to help as well. So
well, that was really interesting because Terry had a friend at work, and he was like, oh, my wife's in hospital, this and that and the other, and she was diagnosed with FND. And I went and visited her in hospital, never met her before, went and visited her, and I was like, I have this too. Like, she's got many more physical issues than I do, but she was just so grateful to just talk to somebody that knew what it was like.
you understood.
Yeah, and I was just like, if just talking to her for a while helps, then that's something.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, Ratty said that she thinks that social media is a rather sanitized version of people's lives. Here, agreed.
I agree.
Tracy McCallum, it's important that we share our experiences with other people. Your story will heal you, and your story will heal somebody else. When you tell your story, you free yourself and give other people permission to acknowledge their own story. She's put that in quotes. Very, very true.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's about where she said they're giving other people permission to acknowledge their own story. I've put a few posts up in the group basically asking people to put their hands up to have a chat. And I know there's quite a few people in the group who have stories of challenges that they've faced and overcome or are still overcoming. But I also know that there's a lot of people who go, oh, no one will want to hear that.
Yeah. And nobody wants to hear about that. Nobody wants to.
What I kind of offer. Exactly. And so what I challenge them with is that, like, you don't, and that's what I've always said, you don't know who is listening. Like, I've had people through the group and through other things that years after I've posted about something or whatever, they've come to me and gone, oh, that really made an impact on me and it made me do this. And I'm like, oh, I don't even remember posting that. And who are you? Like, I don't know this, but they don't comment, they don't like, but they take it in. And with something like this, there'll be people just watching on at some point next week and they'll be taking little things in. And
I think the other thing is, like, you're going to have people share little things with you about they're like, oh, I had that happen too. And it's not just about you telling your story, it's about sharing your story and everybody sharing their life experiences.
Yeah. Because
underneath it all, we're all going through something, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Justine said it's okay to not be okay and sit with that. Huge. I love that, she said. Yes, it's okay. She also said, I'm always trying to be positive and I feel like anytime I'm not, I'll offend someone with my wallowing and when someone has it worse than me. I can understand that. But
I can. And I've said that a few times with people that had different issues. But you know what? Somebody once said to me, what you're going through, just because it's not as bad or whatever, it's still your pain, it's your issue, and it's still hard for you, like, I don't know how many times growing up as a kid, how many of us got told, oh, this kid's starving in Africa and you're not eating your food and all these sorts of things. Like, yeah, there are, but it doesn't make your issues any less valid just because somebody's got it worse.
No.
There's always going to be somebody that's got it worse than you, for sure. And that helps with perspective, but it doesn't devalidate or invalidate your experiences.
Yeah. And it's an indication of whether you have a quality friend or family member to make that space for you and hold that space for you. I mean, an example I had is, so my cousin has pretty terrible lung issues at the moment. Not a great time to have lung issues and live in Melbourne. But anyway, and she's been in and out of hospital for the last couple of weeks and really struggling. And I was on Messenger the other day, 2 days ago, basically telling her how I was feeling like I was dying. Oh, but I don't want to compare myself to you. And she's like, can you just shut up and let it all out? And
Yeah.
I'm like, I never get sick, so I can't cope with sick, but blah, 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 blah. This is what's happening. I hate blah, 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 blah. And then she's like, good. Does that feel better to let it all out? Yes, it does. And I said, thank you, because I know you're going through something way harder. And she's like, no, this is about you at the moment.
Yeah.
There's no comparison. Don't compare.
Yeah.
And I think the key is picking those right people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Susan said, it's so important to feel all your feelings. I suffer from emotional anxiety because I spent too long shoving away bad feelings because I thought they were wrong or a sign of weakness.
I feel you.
Yeah.
I did that for a long time myself. And I mean, crying for me is still a challenge. I don't do crying very well.
No, it's weak, isn't it?
It's terribly weak, and nobody cares anyway. Like, stop sucking.
Yeah.
That's how I was raised. And you know, I've cried probably more in the last 12 months than I have in the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And it's just because I'm allowed to now.
Yeah.
Apparently it's good for you or something.
Apparently. It's crying is weird for me as well. I don't do it well, but I'd like to be able to do it well.
Yeah. I don't think it's something I'm ever going to be good at. I'll be good at other things.
Exactly. Although crying, the one crying that I used to do really, really well was when Oprah used to be on TV. Like, it didn't matter, like, that I hadn't seen Oprah in like years or whatever. The minute it would be on, giving away everyone gets a car or something, and I'd be like, wah! But that's the best kind of crying. Like, I'm not ashamed of happy crying. Crying, I'm okay with happy crying because there's no link to vulnerability or shame or pain or emotion. It's just like, I'm happy for you, I'm crying. But any of the other crying, It
was actually really funny because it was actually a few years ago now. Actually, it was before this diagnosis, but I went to the US to see my sister, and when we left, my older sister and I went to see my younger sister. So my older sister and I, when we were leaving, they're both big criers. They've always cried. And I started crying as well. And my older sister looked at me and she's like, are you crying? It's like, well, I do now sometimes. She's like, oh my God.
Is the world ending? Dee's crying.
I had the same thing at work one time. I was working in a palliative care unit for over 3 years, and we had this one particular patient die, and I was known on that ward as one of the toughest nurses, like in terms of emotions. Like, I was still compassionate and provided care and stuff, but I didn't break. And I started crying after this patient died one time, and the other nurses were in her, like, with me, and the boss came in and they looked at me and they looked at them and they go, what did you, he said, what did you do to her? It was like, it's actually quite funny to surprise people when you start crying, to be honest.
I have never had a conversation about crying. Never. It's funny.
Well,
there you go.
There you go.
And with that, in that note, before I cry, I'm going to wrap this up. Can I just say a massive, massive thank you for sharing that tonight, Dee. That's been great. And this chat afterwards has been amazing. And the engagement from everyone who's been watching online has been awesome too. So thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend. It's Friday night. Enjoy the rest of your wine, the rest of whatever you're doing for the weekend. And we'll catch you later. Catch you next time.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share.
Yeah.
And thanks to everybody for their comments and questions and stuff. It's been amazing.
you can go through and read them all now. I'll leave you to it.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dee.
guys.
All right. See ya.
Bye.